Welcome to the Traveling Professors. I'm Professor Bob.
And I'm Professor Sherry.
And together we are
the Traveling Professors.
Welcome to show number 69 of the Traveling Professors. Today, Sherry and I are going to finish up our walk through Rome the first day that we were there. And this time we'll be walking to the Pantheon. Then we will walk by what is known as the Temple of Adriano, and then go to the Trevi Fountain before leaving by the metro at Barberini, where the Fountain of the Triton is located. So we have a lot of things to see today. Let's get started. Today we're going to start where we left off last time. We're going to head over to the Pantheon, and then we will walk by the Temple of Adriano, which is right here. And then we will go to the Trevi Fountain, and then up to the metro stop here at Barberini, up the Fountain of Triton, that is also located in this region. So plenty to see today. Now there is an awful lot about the Pantheon, as you'll see as we go through this. But let's start with our wonderful model when it was built by Agrippa, pointing out towards the mausoleum of Augustus, because this land is going to look pretty different when we get to the time of Hadrian. The first thing we have to deal with is the name. Cassius Dio, who was a Roman senator, speculated the name came either from the statues of the many gods placed around the building or from the resemblance of the dome to the heavens. His uncertainty suggests that the Pantheon may just simply be merely a nickname, not a formal building. In fact, the concept of a pantheon dedicated to all the gods is questionable because the only definite pantheon recorded earlier than Agrippa's is in Antioch in Syria. Now, if we look at the building that you see here, the front porch had gilded bronze tiles on it. This was built by Agrippa in about 27 BCE in honor of Augustus and the ruling family. But Augustus refused to have it consecrated to himself. There was simply a statue of his placed on the porch. But it was probably first dedicated to the planetary gods, particularly Mars and Venus, because we know from another ancient historian that when the statue of Venus was placed, they supposedly took one of the pearls from Cleopatra's necklace and had it split in half so that each ear would have one half of Cleopatra's pearls. Those gods and goddesses are the actual deities of the Julio-Claudian family, as the symbolization of the dome would have suggested. It's constructed to resemble the vault of the firmament of heaven with a circular opening for the sun at the center. And that oculus, as the sun goes around, it turns the inside of the building into a sundial. But it's not a dark line, it's a beam of light that travels around the building. Now here we have an idea of what the Pantheon looked like during the time of Hadrian. Now, understand that this building was constructed on multiple times. The first destruction, Agrippa's building, was destroyed in a massive fire in 80 AD. And then Domitian rebuilt the Pantheon, only to have it burned down again in 110 AD. So the building that you actually see today is the one that was reconstructed by Hadrian. And that was started in 112 and dedicated in 126 AD. So here is a picture that shows you a cutaway view of the building at the time of Hadrian. Now the interior of this is pretty unique because the height of the oculus, that's the hole in the center where the light comes in, the height of the oculus and the diameter of the internal circle are the same, 43.3 meters, that's 142 feet. A 43.3 meter sphere could fit within the interior of this building. Now the dimensions make a little more sense if you use the actual ancient Roman units of measurement, because the dome spans 150 Roman feet. The oculus is 30 feet in diameter, and the doorway is 40 feet high. But from the floor to the oculus is 150 feet. So you actually would have this, you could put a sphere in this building, and it would fit perfectly from the roof down to the opening. So that's how it remained for quite some time. Of course, we have the destruction of the Roman Empire. So what happens is this becomes a church. So here is what the church looked like at the time of the Renaissance. So let's give you a little background to this. In 609 AD, the Byzantine Emperor Phocas gave the building to Pope Boniface IV, and he converted it into a Christian church and consecrated it to Mary and the Martyrs, May the 13th, 609. And I would point out when they put the altar in, they brought 26 cart loads of relics, basically emptying out the catacombs, bringing them and putting them in a vault underneath where the present-day main altar is located. And today, and we'll see this as we get in a little bit later on, when it was consecrated, Boniface placed the icon of the Mother of God, Panagia Hedroteria, all holy directress, within the new sanctuary. Today it's on the wall behind the main altar. Well, this pretty much remained the same. They did indeed add the bell towers on either side later on. Pope Urban VIII, 1623 to 1644, then ordered the bronze ceiling of the Pantheon's portico to be melted down. Most of the bronze was used to make cannons for the fortification of Castle de San Angelo, with the remaining amount supposed to be used for the various different works. It's also been said that the bronze was used by Bernini to create his famous construction that sits above the high altar at St. Peter's. Unfortunately, there are sources from that same time period that said by the Pope's account 90% of the bronze went for cannons, and that the bronze for Bernini actually came from Venice. And it is still considered a church today. There are multiple altars that are there, and we'll see who is buried there as we walk through it a little bit later. So we've got the background history. Now let's walk to the Pantheon. Pantheon was not very far from the Piazza Navona. So we came down the street, and we ended up coming in on the back side of it. So here you can see the building coming into view. And of course, obviously almost all the marble's been stripped away. So we come in, and here we have a nice view looking up at the dome and the walls around it. Again, you can imagine what that was like with the columns and the marble. And you look at one of the back sections with the window, and then we start walking down that back wall. And in this one, you can see that one of the columns is still there. And then there's a nice shot looking down the entire back side of the Pantheon with the individual column in there. And here's a nice close-up. You can imagine with all of the different marble pieces that were in place. And then you reach the middle point, and then you can look up again. You can see just the size of this. Coming to the corner, if you're getting ready to go around, you can see the lower level where it would have been at the time it was originally constructed. Turning around the other direction, you can look back and see where we had come from. But before we headed into the Pantheon, we noticed something across the way. We come into the Piazza de Minerva, and what we discover is this obelisk with this elephant on it. Now, it's just this Minerva Piazza is dominated by this monument consisting of a marble elephant with an obelisk on its back. An Egyptian obelisk came from the Temple of Isis in Egypt and was found in the garden of the monastery of Santa Maria sopra Minerva in 1665, and the monks wanted to place it in the square in front of the church. The base of the obelisk consists of an elephant with a heavy saddle on its back. It was designed by Bernini, but executed by Ercole Ferrata in 1667. The elephant was an ancient symbol of strength, wisdom, and piety, and it was intended to symbolize those virtues that support true Christian doctrines. An inscription on the plinth explains, it takes a strong mind to bear the burden of wisdom. So that's the elephant and all of its different views. Well, saying goodbye to our elephant friend, it's time to head down the road back to the Pantheon. So there's a nice little view between the buildings. And now we're going down the side. You can see the porch coming into view. And there we have a picture of the side of the dome, which is the largest unsupported concrete dome in the world. And then we're getting a little close to the portico, to the front part. And then you get a view out into the piazza. Now this place was full of people. The Pantheon was full of people. It was free to go in. Now I don't know whether it was just free that day. I know now that you have to get a ticket to go in. But anyway, we're going to go out all the way to the end of the piazza so we can try and get a nice picture of it with the fountain. Now I'm practically standing inside the store of this building to get this picture, which shows obviously the Pantheon with this beautiful fountain with the obelisk in what is known as the Piazza De Rotunda. The focal point of this quarter of Rome is, of course, the Rotunda, the Pantheon. And that, by the way, that is what the people in the Middle Ages called it. The round thing is what rotunda translates to. And then you see in the middle of the piazza, there's a marble fountain. Now, that was erected by Giacomo della Porta in 1575. And then Pope Clement XI had an obelisk, yes, from the Temple of Isis, placed on top of it in 1711. Here's a couple of closer views of the fountain itself. There's the base of it, water squirting everywhere, which is great. And then here's a side view which shows the dedication of Clement XI of putting the obelisk on top of it. Now we're ready to start moving on the inside of the Pantheon. Now here's a modern cutaway of the Pantheon. And we're going to be looking right here at the porch, the portico. So this was a view of the portico from one side as we were coming into the piazza. And then there's a little closer shot of us. We got a little higher up. And then here is that same side. You can start seeing the ceiling. Now from the front, you see the portico. It looks like it's much bigger. But on the front of the portico, you have the inscription. And translated, it says, Marcus Agrippa, son of Lucius, made this building when consul for the third time. However, that was not put there by Marcus Agrippa. Probably the only thing is the front facade of this that survives from the original building. And the original Pantheon that was built by Agrippa did not have a roof on it. It was open air. This was put by Hadrian to honor the man who built the very first one. So here we are coming into the front, and you can look up and see the columns and the inscription and the pediment. And then once you get in, here's the roofing. And you look at the roof construction. And then we start getting ready to go into the cella, or the main area. In this picture, you can see the bronze doors. Now these are massive. They are 14.6 feet wide, and they're 24.7 feet high. They are considered some of the oldest in Rome. The only one that might be older would be the doors on the church of St. John Lateran, because those were the original bronze doors that were from the Senate. For a long time, this was believed that they were actually 15th century replacements for the original, because modern architects deemed it to be too small for the door frames. But an analysis of the technique of making the bronze indicated and confirmed that it was indeed the original doors, a rare example of Roman monumental bronze surviving despite cleaning and the application of Christian motifs over the century. Here we are in the center of the Pantheon. Presently, it is free admission, Monday through Friday. However, on the weekends, you need to book either an audio tour or a tour. And even today, even though it's free, you need to book one day in advance your time. Now, it was completely wide open when we were there several years ago. We just walked in, and as you can see, the place is a mass of people. They're just everywhere. Most of them did leave. There were several tour groups in there, and most of them did leave before we were finished. But needless to say, Sherry's pictures have a lot more people in it because of her height than mine do. So what I'm going to do is, what you see directly ahead of us is the main altar. And then you see on either side of the main altar are what they refer to as sculptural niches. And then on either side of them you see the columns, and in those are altars. So you have an altar, you have two niches, then another altar. So there's 3 on one side and 3 on the other side. I'm going to start on the right-hand side of the screen, and we'll start at the third section and come down to the main altar, and then go from the main altar left up the other direction, and then we'll go out the door. So here is our first section. So what you see here in the niche, you see a painting, and that painting is known as the Madonna of the Girdle and St. Nicholas of Bari. And that was done in 1686. Then you move into the area where the columns are. Now the center, where the altar is, that is the Annunciation, and that's why it's called the Chapel of the Annunciation. And on either side of it are 2 paintings. Now you can see in this one, just a little bit, that happens to be a painting known as the Incredulity of St. Thomas. It was done in 1633 by Bonzi. And on the other side of the Annunciation is St. Lawrence and St. Agnes, which was painted in 1645. After all the people got out, then I went around and took close-up. So here's a close-up of the niche, which is the Madonna of the Girdle in the upper portion, and good old St. Nicholas down below. And then moving to where the altar is located, there is the Annunciation, the beautiful Annunciation, attributed to Mazzolo de Fiori. Now we come to the second section. Now the niche, as you see over here to the right, that houses a 15th century fresco of the Tuscan school, which depicts the coronation of the Virgin. The center point of this altar area, it's the tomb of King Victor Emmanuel II, who died in 1878. Now, this was originally dedicated to the Holy Spirit. So here you have the fresco in its niche, and then here is the area of King Victor Emmanuel with the... There was a competition that was held as far as which architect would design it, and the man who won it was Manfredo Manfredi, and started work in 1885, and it's a bronze plaque surmounted by a Roman eagle with the arms of the House of Savoy. And then a golden lamp burns over the tomb honoring Victor Emmanuel III, who died in exile in 1947. And the area just before you get to the main altar, in the niche right here, you have Lorenzo's St. Anne and the Blessed Virgin. And then in the altar area, that is the altar of the Madonna of Mercy. She is between St. John the Baptist and St. Francis. In the other niche, you have St. Anastasius, which was put there in 1725. That's done by Caminetti. This particular altar area also shows you some of the surviving Roman brickwork as well. Here's a close-up of the niche of St. Anne and the Blessed Virgin. And then when you go to the center, there is the beautiful painting of the Madonna of Mercy between St. John the Baptist and St. Francis. This is also known, by the way, as the Madonna of the Railing, because it originally hung in a niche on the left-hand side of the portico, where it was protected by a railing. It was then moved to the Chapel of the Annunciation before being brought back here in 1837. And then to the other side, the niche that you see here, this of course is the statue of St. Anastasius, done in 1725 by Cometti. Now we come to the centerpiece of the Pantheon. That is the high altar. Now one thing you have to remember as a tourist, this is a church, so they will expect you to dress appropriately and be quiet. And they always have trouble with quiet, because even if there's just a few hundred people whispering, it makes quite a bit of noise. But they periodically will yell out, "Be quiet." You see the whole altar from a distance. See the icon in the middle and the beautiful dome. So let's get in a little closer. So here we have the altar, and of course underneath it are cartloads of relics from the various catacombs throughout Rome that were brought in here. And then you see, again, pretty close, pretty nice shot of the ceiling. Here's a little closer view of the main altar, which of course has been modernized and turned around. And they do services here as well. And then here's a side view. And this is as close as I could get without getting hit by a priest of the icon, the All-Holy Directress, the Mother of God, which was donated by Emperor Phocas from Constantinople when the church was handed over to Pope Boniface IV in 609. Beautiful dome up above the altar. Working our way out from the altar, heading back to the door, we see this section. Now, the area in the columns is the Chapel of the Crucifixion, and you can see the Roman brick wall behind it. The wooden crucifix is from the 1400s, and the left side of the wall has a 1790 painting by Labruzzi of the Descent of the Holy Ghost, and the right side is a low relief of Cardinal Calsavi as he presents Pope Pius VII, the 5 provinces that were restored to the Papal States. Now over here we have our niche, and that is a statue of St. Evacius, which was done in 1727 by Moderati. And then off the other side, we have something a little more interesting. This is the statue, the Madonna of the Rock. But underneath that is something special. So here is our close-up picture, our better picture of St. Eustasio. And then here's the upper part of the niche, which has the Madonna of the Rock. And then down below, in a niche below her, is the tomb of Raphael. This is what a lot of people come to see. Bones and ashes, as the sarcophagus says, of the great artist Raphael. Now his fiancée, Maria Babini, is buried to the right of his sarcophagus because she died before they could be married. Sarcophagus was given by Pope Gregory the 16th, and the inscription reads, translated, "Here lies Raphael, by whom the great mother of all things, nature, feared to be overcome while he was living, when while he was dying, herself to die." And that was written by Pietro Bembo. So when you go to the Pantheon, say hello to Raphael. And we move to the next set of statues and next altar. We are leaving, of course, the Madonna of the Rock over there. And then in the center, we have the tomb of King Umberto I and his wife Margaret de Savanoa. It's in that chapel. The chapel was originally dedicated to St. Michael the Archangel. Then it was dedicated to St. Thomas the Apostle. But now it is where one of the kings of Italy is buried. Next to him, over here, we have, in this niche, we have the statue of St. Agnes by Feliki, and the bust on the left is a portrait of Belisara Peruzzi by Dupree. Now, if we go to looking at the tomb itself, if you remember when we looked at King Victor Emmanuel's tomb, they had a design contest. Well, the gentleman who lost, Giuseppe Sacconi, was given the job of designing the tomb of Umberto I, which is the opposite chapel. Now, the present design is by Sacconi, completed after his death by his pupil, Guido Cirilli. And here's a closer view of that particular tomb. And then, of course, here's a closer view of St. Agnes. And now we just have one more altar area to see. The final niches and altar is dedicated to St. Joseph in the Holy Land. It's also known as the Chapel of the Confraternity of the Virtuosi of the Pantheon, which is a confraternity of artists and musicians formed by a 15th century religious leader, Desiderio de Segni, to ensure that worship was maintained in the chapel. So we've already seen St. Agnes over here on the right-hand side. So over on the left-hand side, we have a painting, and this is the Assumption, which was painted in 1638 by Camasi. And then we have the area in the middle, which is where we have the statue and the altar. And behind it, on one side, is the painting of the Adoration of the Shepherds and the Adoration of the Magi as well. There is also a stucco relief of the Dream of Joseph as well. And there's also Rest during the Flight from Egypt. So it's filled with all sorts of different paintings in this particular area. Now if we get a little closer view, here's the close-up of the statue above the altar of St. Joseph with the Holy Child by Rossi. And then here is the Assumption of Mary into heaven. And standing in the middle of the Pantheon and looking up into the oculus is just amazing. As I said before, the interior of the dome was possibly intended to symbolize the arched vault of heaven. The oculus, the dome's apex, and the entry door are the only natural sources of light in the interior. And again, throughout the day, light from the oculus moves around the space in a reverse sundial effect, marking time with light rather than shadow. And a lot of people say, well, what do you mean? It rains in here? Well, yeah, it does. But the oculus has at the floor, there's a drainage system below the floor that handles all the rain that falls through the oculus. So here's one view of it. Then here's another view later on in the day. And then my daughter and her husband were here at night. And here is a view of what it looked like at night, where you end up with it being blue. And then here is a view of the dome. This is from quite a distance away. And you can see all of this concrete dome. I mean, it's concentrated in various rings, and they kind of go out. And they have, there are arches and all sorts of other things underneath it. And here's a closer view of it. There's actually a railing that allows workers to go up to the top. That's what it looks like from a closer viewpoint. Remember, this would have also been covered with bronze. This bronze was stripped away and taken to Constantinople by Constantine II. So that's why it's just concrete at this point. So that's the roof and the oculus, and now it's time to climb back down and head to the next stop, the Trevi Fountain. Well, here on our map, here we are at the Pantheon, and now we're going to head towards the Trevi Fountain and then to the Barberini Metro. Well, walking away from the Pantheon, not very far away, is the Temple of Adriano. What's left of it, there's the back side of it with the beautiful surviving columns. And then we get to something that I've wanted to see all my life, the Trevi Fountain. And here it is. Oh yes, as you can see, they're doing work on the Trevi Fountain. It was dry as a bone. Disappointing. You'd walk through the middle of it. So here's another shot of the Trevi Fountain and the construction work, and another one. Then, when you travel overseas, you go to these places, frequently there's restoration and excavation and all sorts of things, but I did not expect that to happen. However, thank goodness, 2 years before, my oldest daughter Laura and her husband became the traveling professors for me. They were there in Rome when it worked. So here are their pictures. Here's a full shot of the Trevi Fountain. Now the fountain is the largest in Rome, located in the Palazzo Poli. And of course the legend is you throw in a coin if you want to come back to Rome again. Well, they had a place where you could put a coin, and we're going to come back to Rome again, that's for sure, at another time. Now that big Baroque wall that you see of the fountain, that's 66 feet wide, 85 feet high. It was built by Nicola Salvi in the period between 1732 and 1762. It's a triumphal arch with 3 archways and a mighty attic story. In the central niche behind the artificial rocks is the figure of Oceanus, the god of the ocean, on a shell-shaped chariot drawn by seahorses. And of course he's surrounded by shells and tritons. The side niche contains a statue of abundance, that's on the left, and healing on the right. Those are done by Filippo Valli. And the relief above shows Agrippa agreeing to building the Aqua Virgo and the story of its creation. Of course, the Aqua Virgo is the great aqueduct that brought water into Rome, one of them that brought water into Rome, and that many of these fountains that still function in Rome are still using the original Aqua Virgo. Here's the nice close-up view showing the chariot and the water and, of course, the people. And again, a little closer. And then here we have Triton. And then there's a nice shot off to the side. And then went around the side so you could get a shot of all the people that come into this place. This is just stuffed with people. And fortunately, Laura and Matt were there for a couple of days. So they went back at night and got this beautiful nighttime picture of the fountain. So my stand-in traveling professors saved us. And finally we reached the Barberini Piazza here, and this is the beautiful fountain of the Triton that you find. But of course we are in this position because we're heading to the little red M in the corner over here where the metro is, so that we can head back to our apartment and rest, because it's been a long walk through Rome for our first day. Sherry and I hope you enjoyed the tour. Please come by our YouTube channel at Bob Packett, and please subscribe and leave some comments. Thank you very much. I've been doing podcasting on history for over 15 years. I've got over 4,000 shows, and I've done CDs, which of course can be sent out as USBs. So if you would really like to get more on history for free, then come by my website, as you see here, historyaccordingtobob.com, and see what's there. So thank you very much again.